All right, welcome to another deep dive. We're looking at Havells India today, specifically their Q3 financials for fiscal year 2024-25. Got all sorts of releases and reports, so let's see what story the numbers tell.
Yeah, peeling back the layers, going beyond just the raw feeders and really understanding how Havells is operating, what their strategies seem to be.
So big picture first. Havells announced an 11% jump in net revenue, hitting 4,883 crores. Pretty impressive, right? What's fueling that growth?
Looks like a combination of factors. You've got strong consumer sentiment, especially coming out of the festive season, and continued demand from infrastructure and industrial projects. Suggests Howells is well positioned to kind of ride both those waves.
Now, reports also mention EBITDA, 432 crores. For those of us not fluent in Nine speak, what's that tell us?
EBITDA earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Think of it as like the core profitability from operations. How much cash is Havells generating before you factor in debt, accounting adjustments, that sort of thing.
So good EBITDA is a good sign for investors then.
Generally, yeah, it indicates the business is, healthy, generating enough cash to cover its expenses and potentially reinvest for growth.
Gotcha. Now, profit after tax, or PAT, reached 283 crores. A bit lower than last year, though. Any idea why?
Well, it could be a few things. Fluctuating commodity prices, those can definitely impact margins. Plus, Havells has been investing in new product categories. Those initial investments can sometimes weigh on profits in the short term.
Makes sense. Now, I'm curious about these different segments. Havells is in switchgears, cables, lighting, electrical consumer durables, Lloyd consumer products. Quite the portfolio.
Yeah, it really gives us a chance to see how each piece contributes to the overall puzzle.
Let's start with switchgears. Their contribution margin was 36% this quarter, a bit lower than last year. Report mentions the plant relocation impacting this care to explain.
Sure. Relocating a plant, that's a lot of upfront cost, potential disruptions to production. It takes time to regain that operational efficiency. That seems to be reflected in that slightly lower margin this quarter.
Sounds like a temporary blip then, not a major concern.
That's how I'd read it. Reports actually suggest they expect the switchgear segment to rebound as the new plan gets fully operational, iron out those relocation kinks.
Interesting. Now, the cable segment had good revenue growth, but there's this term, channel destocking, tied to copper prices. Break that down for us.
So imagine this. Copper prices are high. Everyone stocks up, right? Expecting them to keep going up. But when prices soften, like they did this quarter, distributors start selling off existing inventory before buying more. Creates that temporary dip in demand, even if the underlying business is strong.
So Havells cables are actually doing better than the numbers might initially suggest.
Exactly. It's a good reminder to, look beyond the surface of financial reports, understand the context, what external factors might be at play.
All right, starting to get a clearer picture here. What about lighting? Mentioned earlier that LED prices have been under pressure. Did that impact Havells?
Not really, surprisingly. Their lighting segment actually maintained a good contribution margin, like around 31, 32%. Tells me they're doing something right to manage those external pressures.
Like what? Cutting corners or something?
Not necessarily. Could be a mix of things, right? Maybe focusing on higher margin products or streamlining operations, cutting costs internally. Perhaps they've got good supplier relationships, negotiating better deals. Hard to say for sure without more info, but the fact their margins are holding steady in a tough market, that's definitely positive.
Now, there's also this others segment, kind of a catch-all for newer ventures, right?
Yeah.
Reports say they're actually turning a profit there year to date, despite a small loss this quarter. What's driving that?
It's interesting, right? Havells clearly willing to invest in new areas, experiment a bit with emerging categories. They're not just sitting back, relying on the established products. That others segment shows their entrepreneurial side, that ability to adapt to shifting consumer trends.
Makes you wonder, what are those new categories? You're talking smart home devices, renewable energy solutions, whatever.
Hard to tell from these reports alone, but definitely something to watch going forward. If Havells can really establish themselves in those emerging markets, could be a huge growth driver down the line.
So we've looked at the past performance, but what about the future? Havells' own statements, are they optimistic, cautious, what?
I'd say they're striking a balance, confident about switchgears rebounding once the plant relocation is done. They also acknowledge the, potential impact of external factors, government regulations, economic trends. Those are always wild cards.
Right, no company operates in a vacuum. But beyond those big picture things, what other trends are they watching? Reports mentioned evolving consumer preferences. Anything specific there?
Of course, consumer behavior is always in flux, right? Companies like Havells got to stay ahead of the curve. They're paying attention to like the demand for energy efficient products, the rise of smart home solutions, also how technology is changing the way people shop, interact with brands.
So not just making good products, but understanding how those products fit into people's lives, their evolving lifestyles. Smart move.
Exactly. It's a more holistic approach to business, recognizing that success isn't just about numbers, but about creating real value for customers, building those long-term relationships.
So if I'm following correctly, Havells is seeing double-digit revenue growth. They're profitable, investing in new areas, and paying attention to consumer trends. Sounds like they're in a pretty good spot, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I'd agree. A solid strategy, and they seem to be executing it well. But remember, the business world is, constantly changing. What works today might not work tomorrow. So the question is, how do they maintain this momentum, keep adapting to those challenges and opportunities coming their way?
Good point. Not just where they are, but where they're going. What signs should we look for to gauge their future success?
One key indicator will be their ability to innovate, stay ahead of the competition. Are they releasing exciting new products? Are they using technology to improve operations, enhance the customer experience?
And what about their expansion into those new categories we talked about? Can they replicate their success in those emerging markets?
Another crucial area to watch for sure. New ventures are always risky. Not all of them will pan out. But if Havells can leverage their existing strengths, their brand recognition, to gain a foothold in those new areas, it could really boost their long-term growth.
Okay, so innovation, expansion, those are two big ones to watch. Anything else?
Another important factor will be their ability to attract and retain top talent. Competition for skilled workers is fierce. Companies like Havells need to create a workplace that draws in the best and brightest.
Right. A company's only as good as its people. Now, before we wrap up, there's one thing about Havells I found particularly interesting in these reports.
What caught your eye?
Well, it's their focus on sustainability. It's not just a footnote. It seems woven into everything they do, from products to supply chain to internal practices.
You're right. It's not just a buzzword for them. It's a core value, seems to be driving their decision-making. And
Right.
that's important not just ethically, but from a business standpoint, too.
How so?
Well, consumers are more and more demanding that companies be, environmentally and socially responsible. It's not enough to just offer a good product or service anymore. People want to support brands that share their values.
So Havells' sustainability efforts, those could actually attract new customers, build loyalty.
Absolutely. It's a way to stand out in a crowded market, appeal to those consumers who prioritize sustainability, and that segment is growing all the time.
That's fascinating. It really shows how doing good and doing well, they're not mutually exclusive. They can actually go hand in hand.
Exactly. And Havel seems to be, a prime example of that, showing it's possible to be successful, profitable, and be a responsible corporate citizen.
Well, this has been a really insightful look at Havells India. We've covered a lot, from financials to their strategies to sustainability. They're clearly a company on the move. Exciting to see what they do next.
Yeah, agreed. Definitely one to keep an eye on.
As we wrap up, it really seems like Havells is set up for a strong future. But, there's always that element of unpredictability, right?
Yeah, for sure. Kind of like navigating a ship through uncharted waters, right? You can have all the best charts and compass, but you still got to be ready for, unexpected storms, shifting currents.
So for Havells, what could those storms look like? What challenges are they facing maybe in the quarters, years even?
Well, one thing I think is just the constant competition. The electrical goods sector, it's crowded, lots of players, domestic and international. Havells needs to keep innovating, differentiating themselves to, stay ahead of the pack.
Makes sense. And they are operating in a global market.
Yeah.
So any kind of economic slowdown, geopolitical stuff, even supply chain issues, that could all impact them too.
Absolutely. Those are factors outside their control, but they got to be ready to adapt, respond quickly to any kind of external shock.
Like they need to have their eyes on the horizon constantly for both opportunities and threats. Speaking of opportunities that push into new product categories, that seems like a big bet. Any potential pitfalls there?
Well, new ventures are always risky, right? They might run into unexpected challenges in these new markets, understanding consumer preferences maybe, or navigating regulations. And they need to allocate resources carefully, make sure these new ventures don't, drain the core business.
Real balancing act, huh?
Yeah.
Investing in the future without neglecting the present.
Yeah.
A lot to handle.
It is, and that's often what separates the successful companies from those that fall behind, right?
Hmm.
Being able to adapt, innovate, execute on multiple fronts, that's crucial for long-term success.
Now, before we let you go, I want to circle back to something that really struck me about Havells, and it's that commitment to sustainability. It's not just, a side project for them. It really seems baked into their whole strategy.
Right, and it's not just about, doing the right thing. It's becoming a smart business move too. Consumers are more and more they're voting with their wallets, choosing brands that align with their values.
So Havells doing this, being sustainable, it can actually bring in new customers, make people more loyal to the brand.
Absolutely. It's a way to stand out, right? Appeal to that growing segment of consumers who really care about their environmental impact.
It's interesting to see how sustainability has gone from like a nice to have to a need to have, especially for businesses that want to stay competitive.
Yeah, it's a trend that's only going to get stronger, I think.
Yeah.
Consumers, investors, even employees, they're all demanding that companies, step up, be more responsible.
So as our listeners continue to follow Havells, I think it's worth paying attention to how those sustainability initiatives evolve, how the impact the company overall will give them an edge, attract new investors, help them get and keep good employees. A lot to think about there.
Great points. And it's not just about Havells, right? This is happening across industries. Companies that ignore sustainability, they do so at their own risk.
Well, I think we've really unpacked Havells' Q3 performance, explored those key factors that'll shape their future. Been a great deep dive, and I think our listeners are now well-equipped to follow their progress.
Agreed. We've given them the tools, the insights to analyze not just Havells, but any company, really, to understand what's driving the business world today.
And that's what the deep dive is all about, right? Giving our listeners the knowledge, those critical thinking skills to navigate, the complexities of the modern world.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into Havells India. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.